Back third down on the 8. In trouble. Got a block behind him. Going to throw and a run. Complete to the 25, to the 30. Lindsey's got 35, 40. Lindsey's got 45, 50, 45, 40. Run, Lindsey. 25, 20, 50, 10, 5. Lindsey stop. Lindsey stop. Lindsey stop.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dogs Down South. Happy to have you a part of the show tonight. It's a pop-up show, man. It's a pop-up show. What's a pop-up show? We just got a lot of stuff to talk about that realistically not necessarily was on the agenda this week, and we'll be able to talk about it. But as always, I'm going to add in my buddy Adam Fisher. What's up, Fish? How are you, man?
What's up, man? Good. Glad we have enough extra content to talk about finally.
It's an extra content kind of week, man. Pop-up show. We should have like a tent, right?
Yeah.
Like a pop-up tent? No, bad joke.
We should have changed the background to a bunch of those like tailgating tents.
Just being a tent with some flashlights, bro. That's crazy. Yeah. Hey, man, so I'm in, if you don't realize, I am in Sanford Stadium. Not really, but also a little bit of a different. Yeah, man, a little different background. You know what I'm saying? I decided to just drive up to Athens and say, you know what, man, we're going live for this pop-up show from Athens, man. But this stadium right here, man, won't have anybody in it next week. But after that, we will have some fans in this stadium. But I can tell you this much, what happened this past Saturday was scrimmage 2 and the final scrimmage of the so-called fall preseason type atmosphere. But we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. But Fish, kind of the reason we're having the pop-up show tonight is, man, there's just a lot of like loose content out there, right, that just needs to be talked about. There's so much going around about what's going on with the defensive line, what's going on with scrimmage 2, what's going on with, you know, is Georgia, are they progressing? Are they the better team this year? Are they digressing? Like, what are they doing? Do they have enough this year? Were they elite last year? Are they elite this year? And it's just like, I thought it'd be cool to create some space, right? We have an agenda for tomorrow night when we go live for our normal weekly show, but I thought it'd be cool to create some content tonight and talk just about some of those loose topics. And that way, anybody who joins or either follows this at a later date and turns it on can kind of hear the scoop. I also have some pretty controversial content from another podcast that I actually respect a lot. From that SEC podcast, Michael Bratton, who cousin Shane, which I follow a lot on that SEC podcast, and I know you said earlier, Fish, that you've actually turned that on a few times. But dude, he went live on Finebaum, man, and just ripped Georgia a new one. Actually, for some Georgia fans, if you don't follow their podcast, I even hate now that I'm going to give them some followers, but you know, it's like I followed the show for 2 years now, and I thought it was great content. Now, do I hate on them just because they said some things about Georgia? No. I mean, I get it. Georgia's not going to always get, you know, perfectionist type comments, but I definitely tell you, he had some content on Finebaum that we can definitely talk about tonight. But to kind of start the night off, Fish, like, what do you think about, obviously you've seen the clip before we play it, but like, what do you think in general about some of the things that just sports writers are saying about the Dogs this year? What are some doubters saying this year about the Dogs?
Just clickbait. They've got to say bad things. I mean, we do have some unproven stuff, you know, but every team does at this juncture. You know, nobody knows exactly what we're going to get with any team. You know, I mean, we're number one and getting a lot of hype and praise because we're Georgia, just like Bama used to because they were Bama. You know, we've lost one regular season game in the past 3 seasons. You know,
right.
So, I mean, we deserve all the praise, but, you know, that gets old after a while. So these guys got to come up with stuff, you know, to amplify, magnify, to talk about, to, you know, for content. Like, they can't just say we're awesome all the time. You know, they have to mix it up, you know, or else people are just going to get bored and tired. You know, that's not good content.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. And, you know, some of the stuff that was brought up, and we can dive into it all. I mean, I've heard things from Steve Spurrier and what, you know, I don't know if you heard about Spurrier, but he picked Alabama to win the SEC this year. And,
course.
There's just so much stuff going around, and we're like, there's a lot of. I'm excited. Obviously, I didn't start the show like this, but I think today, if I'm not mistaken, we're officially 10 days away. Am I wrong? So we're Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 11 days. 11 days. Tomorrow would have been 10 days. So we're 11 days until Georgia Clemson at noon kickoff, and we're going to talk about who we think is going to finish 1-16 and who, like, where they're at in that pecking order and who we think is going to make the playoff. But obviously, some of these guys already have their kind of renditions. And, some of the craziest things that I've heard is, you look at the defensive line. And yes, we're going to listen from Kirby in a minute, and he talks about injuries. And the injury list sounds very daunting. And the defensive line continues to show up in that, right? Obviously, you look at Smile and what he's working through, but you look at a linebacker core that's very deep this year. I've seen great things from the offensive line. I've heard offensive line is probably one of the strongest groups that we have out there this year, obviously with running backs as well. I've even heard some injury stuff going on in the wide receiver room, things of that nature. But obviously, defensive line is what we're hearing from the most, right? So, when you look at things and we play some of this video, first off, let's just play this video. I'm going to add it to the stage right now, and let me hop over here and let's
we should do this more often.
Let's hear from Mr. Michael Bratton. Sorry, I don't have it prepped up perfect.
Watch and say,
I'm gonna try to. Oh, I got the wrong clip too. See, man, rookie mistake, dude.
Get him on in a few minutes.
Rookie mistake.
Who do you think is being undervalued right now?
So he's talking about the SEC.
Build up immediately.
Talking to Michael Bratton in honor of Larry, who will be.
Okay, so here we go. So he's talking about this guy named Larry, who is a big Alabama fan. But we'll let it run.
It's
We'll
been
let
a
you
battle. Fans are just not. I mean, they understand that Nick Saban is gone, but nothing else, according to most of our callers, has changed. Agree?
Well, it's changed for me, Paul, because I was calling it the decaying dynasty last year. So I think going from Tommy Rees to Kalen DeBoer, there's literally not a bigger upgrade in coaching in all the SEC, probably the country. So Alabama, I think, is going to make the college football playoff. And in honor of Larry, Paul, I'll go so far as to say Alabama's going to beat Georgia in Tuscaloosa. And if I'm wrong, I'll send Larry another case of beer to down his sorrows.
I think he's going to be pretty happy with that prediction. Why do you say that? Most people think Georgia looks pretty unbeatable.
Right. Well, Kirby Smart can't beat Alabama. That's the main reason why. I believe he's 1-5. It's in Tuscaloosa. I think Alabama's going to be playing with house money for that game. Everybody's going to be picking Georgia, just like you said. I think Georgia missed a huge window last year to win 3 in a row. Probably would have beaten Michigan, Florida State, whoever they had to play in the college football playoff. And I'm wondering if Georgia is just not as elite on the line of scrimmage like they were the 2 seasons they won the national championship. Carson Beck may be the best player, best quarterback in the country, but the SEC is all about the line of scrimmage. I think there's a chance Georgia is slipping before our eyes.
Talking to Michael Bratton, a couple more quick hitters here before we get to the star of the show, Larry.
So let's kind of pause this and let's kind of enter into this real quick. So obviously, Michael Bratton, I told you earlier, I've listened to the SEC podcast for a while. And I think, you mentioned it, Fish, earlier, when people come on to, the Finebaum show, right? It feels like one big, like, I don't know, like they just kind of act a fool type thing. Do I think that he's wrong about anything? Maybe not. And we can talk about that. I'll be an understanding person. We'll talk about some of the things that may be factual. But some of the other things that he says, and it's not in this clip that you're going to hear, is you're going to hear him say that Texas is not going to make the playoffs this year. He actually has his 4 teams as Alabama winning the SEC. Actually, no, he has Ole Miss winning the SEC, Alabama, Missouri, Georgia is kind of 4th, but I don't know if that technically is where he has them. And then he has Texas as the first team out of the playoff. So my thing is, and I have this up here, so let's hit this real quick. So let's look at the terminology of what he sees as far as like scheduling. So when you look at Texas's schedule, and I don't have it pulled up here, so let me pull it up. and it's something I can actually look at. But when you look at Texas' schedule, the reason why I'm just wondering about how, how he sees this is when I look at Texas, I see Colorado State, I see Michigan. So I look at Colorado State, I think that's a win. And remember, these are SEC games. Michigan, whether it's a win or loss, doesn't matter. UTSA, it's a win. Louisiana Monroe, it's a win. So here's your SEC slate. Mississippi State, I think it's a win. Oklahoma, let's just say it's a win. Let's say Georgia's a loss. They're 2-1. Vanderbilt's a win, 3-1. Florida's a win, 4-1. Arkansas is a win, 5-1. Kentucky's a win, 6-1. So you're telling me that the game that might be in question is Texas A&M, right? So first off, about Texas Fish, what do you think about his comments about Texas? You think he's right about Texas or wrong?
I think it's 50-50. It could go either way. The offense did take a big hit with the running back injuries this training camp or fall camp, sorry. And apparently there's some QB controversy in Austin as well.
Texas?
Heard. Yeah. Okay. Like a lot of people want Manning to be the starter because of like the one throw he threw. He threw that first pass like 40 yards downfield, but the guy was so wide open there was nobody within 15 yards. It wasn't like, I mean, you could have thrown that, I could have thrown that, anybody could have thrown that. It just happened to be somebody with the last name Manning. So now there's a lot of fans in Texas that are screaming for Manning. So, but I think that Kentucky game could be a giant question mark as well down there at the end of the season, assuming, attrition doesn't hit Kentucky hard. I think that's a possibility, and I think that might be something that he was trying to say too, just without saying it. I think that might be one of the games he was looking at as a loss, maybe, potentially. Where is that game?
Well, and now that I think about it, Fish, I looked at it's kind of weird because it's not SEC games this year. So it is, am I wrong? I mean, so how they determine whether you go to so the playoff is one thing. We're talking about the playoff. We're not talking about the SEC championship, but as far as the playoff is concerned, if they're out of the playoffs, then he's assuming he's saying they're 9-3. So he's assuming that they're going to lose to Michigan, Georgia, and either Kentucky or A&M. Am I wrong? And A&M is at College Station.
Yeah.
So that's what he's assuming.
What about the Kentucky game?
Kentucky game is in Austin.
Dang,
so that's my thing. He's got him at 9-3, and he's got him not making the playoff. Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, Michigan will be tough, man. The Big House, second game of the year, could tell a lot about where they stand as far as their run game. It could expose a lot about how they lost Murphy, Garrett. I don't know, man. I'm sorry, Murphy and Sweat. I'm saying Miles Garrett, man. That'd have been an incredible middle combo. But I mean, a lot of people look and go, it's based off of the schedule, right? So he's got Georgia in there, he's got Ole Miss in there. But for kicks and giggles, let's look at Ole Miss. He's very high on Ole Miss, and I don't want to give anything away for tomorrow night. But now you got Furman. This is Ole Miss's schedule. You got Furman. You got to assume Middle Tennessee State is a win. You got to assume Wake Forest is a win. Georgia Southern's 4-0. They got Kentucky in Oxford as their first SEC game, South Carolina. So they could possibly be 6-0 going into Baton Rouge. Now, between me and you, do you think they have enough? Now, Michael Bratton he's very low on LSU. And him and Finebaum get into it a lot about LSU because LSU is a team that Finebaum's really high on this year.
He loves Brian Kelly.
Yeah, he does. So when you look at what's going on with that, do you think Kentucky and Oxford's a win or a loss? And do you think he's 6-0 going into Death Valley?
I think it's a strong possibility because that Kentucky game's a road game. Maybe if it was in Lexington, it could be more of a toss-up. But I think, it's in Oxford. I think that's a go for sure.
Yeah, so basically their games are, their gauntlet is LSU by Oklahoma and Oxford. Their big games, 2 out of the 3 big games are in Oxford. That's Oklahoma, Georgia, and they got they got to go to LSU. So they can lose one of these. Maybe they can lose 2 of these, right? depending on how Oklahoma's doing at this time, right? Definitely they can't win 3. They can't lose 3. I think 9-3 is not going to work for them. Just because, I mean, not stretching out into other schedules too much outside of the SEC, but I do see a Missouri a lock because of their schedule. I think Murray State's a win, Buffalo's a win, Boston College is a win, Vandy's a win. Can you imagine this? It's all gonna. I just got to see A&M play, right? Week 1, A&M will be a huge test because they have A&M, UMass, Auburn, Alabama. So it's whether or not they're a 1-loss team going into Alabama or an undefeated team. If they're undefeated, they lose to Alabama, which is not a sure thing. They lose to Alabama. The bad thing is it's in Tuscaloosa. Then they have Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas. So just by their schedule alone, I think Missouri, they can't lose more than 1 because of the weakness of their schedule. I don't think they can lose to Oklahoma or Alabama and lose to an Ole Miss. That might be me. I don't think a 2-loss Missouri. Maybe I'm wrong. I just think their schedule is too weak.
Their schedule is a little weak for that, I believe, too. They're going to have to run the table, I believe. Or 1 loss. I think they can only afford 1 loss.
Yeah.
But I think that's very manageable.
Right. But let's dive into like what Bratton's saying from the podcast, from SEC podcast. So he's looking at Georgia and he's confirming that there is a loss in Tuscaloosa at Alabama and that there is a loss in Oxford at Ole Miss. And he's saying they still get into the playoff. Which that's the goal, right? I mean, Kirby's goal is always this: win the SEC, obviously make it to the playoff, and win the national championship. But there is still a lot of out there for him as far as the SEC championship is concerned, right? Because we don't know what this playoff will look like in the future, but there's already mad talk about if this is the right, thing. I can only see them making this playoff more bizarre than it's already going to be this year. I mean, it's going to be kind of cool, man, because we're going to be watching, we're kind of going to be watching what's similar to the NFL playoffs this year, So let's dive in. So what do you think? So he says that Georgia is not as elite as they have been in the past. So obviously I don't have a ton of statistics because I'm not ready for that because this is a pop-up show. But what is the big difference? Let's put some things in the left and right side of the category. What are some things this year that we have that we didn't have last year? We'll go back and forth. I'll tell you what I think some things that we do have this year that we didn't have last year. Running back depth, right? I think we have more depth. Although I've heard injury report, Rod Robinson's dealing with a toe. Is ETN playing against Clemson? I don't know. Will that be interesting? Because then maybe that's why Frazier has gotten a really solid look. I don't know if you guys heard, but Nate Frazier's getting a ton of carries in fall because maybe, just maybe, he's a second or third string guy against Clemson. And we may be on the backs of Branson Robinson a lot against Clemson. So I think running back depth, but as far as the season, I think running back depth is a plus. We didn't have that last year. What about you? What's one thing you think we have now we didn't have last year?
More than one tight end.
Okay.
I think if we lose Delp or we lose Urasek, then we have somebody else. Last year, it seemed like when Bowers went out that Beck just lost all faith in whoever our tight end was, be it Lucky or Delp, But this year, I mean, he's got a little Delp. Lucky's a little better, Delp supposedly is going to be the man, and Urasek is doing great things, I'm hearing. So, tight end depth. Like, nobody, if we lose one person besides Carson Beck, take him out of the equation, but we're not going to be struggling, to find a replacement or somebody else to fill that production. Like we lost McConkey and Bowers last year, and they weren't near 100% against Alabama. And Beck just kind of looked a little lost, honestly.
Okay.
In my opinion, so
you're saying
that's going to be huge.
So you're saying that in the SEC championship, our tight end play was non-existent because we didn't trust Delp, we didn't trust Lucky, we didn't trust anything we had going on, and obviously, I'm drawing a blank. Delp, Lucky, he just medically redshirted and is not going to be playing anymore. We had him last year. I forget his name. Anyways, 3 tight ends that were highly recruited, but we didn't trust the position a lot. I like that. I like yours second. I like Delp. I like the depth this year. And I heard Lucky looked really great. I heard he got a ton of snaps in scrimmage too. I'll take that. I think linebackers, even though it was a strength last year, this year, I think we were hurt. I think we depended a lot on Dumas Johnson last year. CJ Allen really stepped his game up. He became a leader on that defense, maybe a little bit late. But you look at all of the studs, and you've heard about who stood out during camp. I've heard great things about Damon Wilson. He's actually now an overall, he's not just a third down guy for him anymore. Remember that name, Damon Wilson, numbers 10.
That's my guy.
I think he's going to have a year this year, man. And you look, Smiles, he's hurting a little bit. But you got Justin Williams, 5-star freshman who played a lot during spring, and he's been here for fall. He's got to step up on everybody. Quintavious Johnson is a name I've heard being popped up left and right as a standout at the linebacker position. Jelon Walker, another one. Michael Williams, don't forget, Michael Williams is going to be a little bit of a hybrid this year. He's going to play some linebackers, he's going to play some end. We are like, I just feel like our linebacker room, man, is going to make up a lot for our defensive line depth. We run a 3-4, 3-3-5 tight type thing. And I think Schumann can do enough with that to get us some. I mean, and look at the offenses. Like, I don't think the offenses are built around kind of these Army Navy type settings where that nose guard and that depth in the middle of that, although it's nice to have, but I think it's a little bit more. It's played more on the edges. And I heard Bratton say, it's one in the trenches, and I get that, but the trenches are more and more manipulated nowadays. I really do. The Jordan Davises are byproducts of they're almost non-existent hardly anymore coming into the draft, right? So I got linebackers. What's one more that you have that you think we're here this year, but last year we weren't there?
Wide receivers.
Okay. Why?
I mean, just Dylan Bell isn't going to have to be a running back. He's going to be the number one. Him or Dom Lovett, number one, number two. Then Arian Smith, I'm sure he worked on his hands a lot, plus that speed, that downfield shot. If he can catch the ball, that's a weapon. Kobe Young, red zone. Our goal line offense last year was atrocious. It was terrible.
Right.
Like our red zone offense was not awesome. But this year we've got somebody that Beck can just drop back, throw a back shoulder fade to, and he'll go up and get it over most quarterbacks. Yeah. So I think that's a huge help. Yeah. And, especially like, again, when we lost Bowers and McConkey, those are Beck's weapons. I mean, if you watch the Auburn game, if it wasn't for Brock Bowers, we probably would have lost that game. In my opinion, because he made some huge catches and got that last touchdown. So, that was huge. And, when we lost him, we were just lost, it seemed like.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we've got a lot more depth, tight end and wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. Like, I kind of took it pretty rough, man. I mean, it's not that I can take negative energy, man, but like, it's just the way that it came across. It was like, okay, Georgia might lose a few games. And we've talked about the possibilities, and we're going to break it down tomorrow night a little bit more in depth with scheduling and what we see the SEC looking like. Before we get into week 0, how many people are excited to see Georgia Tech and Florida? I never thought I'd be excited to see Georgia Tech and Florida State play, but I am this week because it's the only viable game that's worth watching.
Well, I'm waking up watching Hawaii. Game day.
Come on, man, from Dublin,
Ireland,
man.
Over Delaware.
What time is game day, man? What time is it in Dublin at 9 a.m.?
I don't even know. No idea.
Is it a night game? I don't even know. But anyways.
I don't know. It might be.
But like, I took it kind of on the chin a little bit, man, because I think the terminology that I heard from him was dying dynasty, and they're not as elite as everybody thinks they are, right? But then again, if you listen to his commentary about a ton of teams, he's very high on Ole Miss, and it's weird. He's very high on Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, and I'm hearing mixed reviews from Alabama. I'm hearing some good, but like, talk to me about let's this is a pop-up show, man. Let's talk about Alabama a little bit, right? Dude, I have seen more TikTok videos of players dancing in the locker room in the past 3 weeks than I've seen in the Nick Saban era combined. And I don't care. We can go back to MySpace. I ain't seen one Alabama video of players, and don't get me wrong, I'm all about having a good time. But you don't see Kirby. I mean, they do a lot of stuff behind the scenes for culture at Georgia, but you don't see them needing to put anything on social media, right? What do you think of this Kalen DeBoer like era? Like, and we're going to see some. They're going to. I mean, they get some tough games out of the block. I mean, I can tell you, all eyes for me are going to be on that Wisconsin game because that's the first test on the road going to Wisconsin. Then obviously their first opener. But what's your take on? Let's just throw some stuff out there about Alabama. What do you think about Alabama, Fish?
I just think there's different ways to coach. I don't know. Colorado is a good example of this. They were all like loosey goosey and everything last year, and just relaxed, and all about flexing and doing the watch thing, which is all fun. But honestly, I don't know. Saban was successful for a reason, and his way of coaching is proven. Like you got to be serious. I think that could be a distraction to be all, about certain things, worried about other things and not the main thing. Like Kirby used to say, you got to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is winning. It's not what kind of watch you're wearing, what kind of shoes you have on, that kind of thing, which is all fine and good. Believe me, I like to flex. I like to have my Nike. I like to, in fact, I just ordered, a Nike shirt, shorts, those shoes that just came out, got those coming in. Like, I'm here for that. But I think it's a distraction if you're trying to win another championship and, win some football games down the road. I think Kirby does what he does for a reason.
Right. And, I think a lot of times because Kirby holds his cards very close to him, I think what you're seeing out there is, I mean, dude, the most that I've seen, if you remember scrimmage 2, and we're going to talk about it here in a minute, scrimmage 2, man, they allowed recruits and recruits' families to come in and watch the game, some of the players' families, but that was it, man. And basically all you caught was some social media, Instagram, 36-second footage of the scrimmage, man. I mean, Kirby really holds his hand close to him, and I'm gonna be honest, what it reminds me of, man, this lead up. Are you ready for this? This lead up of like not bought into Georgia type thing, even though like it's weird. Up until this last 2 weeks, everybody's been bought into Georgia, and the media says the same thing. I mean, the media and the preseason poll has Georgia at 1, right? And that's with Ohio State second. But it reminds me of the year we opened up against Oregon, man. It reminds me of that year where everybody was like, what does Georgia have? What are they holding? What can they do? Stetson Bennett, can he do this? Can he do that? And dude, it was like, I couldn't believe what was in front of my eyes against Oregon, because I felt Oregon was a really good team that year. And you look at Bo Nix, and the guy's one of the better performing rookie quarterbacks in the league right now. And we just really ran the gauntlet on Oregon that year, man. And so, like, I'm wondering what we're gonna see. I'm missing, you know what, man? I'm missing comments. My bad, man. What's up, Rich, man? How are you, man? Running back depth, quarterback experience. My bad, man. I should have looped you in. See, rookie mistake, man. What's up, Grant? Happy to have you, Rich, man. Glad you're listening in, man.
Getting all the bugs out of the way before the season starts.
Exactly. So, man, like at the end of the day, like you just kind of look at this and go, Kirby holds his cards really close, man. Like, what are we going to see week 1? I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I've heard from player interviews. I've heard this offense, man, is like, I hear it time and time again. And this defense ain't shabby, man. This is definitely a top 10 defense, just coming out of the gates. Maybe top 5, top 10, top 5 defense. They're like, man, we're playing against the best offense, man. How are we not going to be prepared? We play against the best offense in the country, right? That's the defense saying that, man. I don't know, man. I was kind of rubbed the wrong way. I think elite is a strong word, but I don't think we were elite last year against Alabama. We had no Brock Bowers. We had no Ladd McConkey. We had parts of Amarius Mims not in that game, right? Defensive line, yeah, they picked and prodded the defensive line, but I mean, linebacking core is better. I just think there's parts of that game you look back and go, that was a full steam ahead Alabama team. I don't remember any injuries that they had last year, right? In that game that were telling. But
Not
when
the
you take,
detrimental now.
but when you take away, man, three fish, first round picks, they are not in our offense, man. And then you look at the strength of this team this year. That's on paper. We're not saying it's. We'll see. We're ready in 11 days to see what we are, right?
Yeah.
But man, you look at the linebacker room. You look at the running back depth. You look at the experience at quarterback, which Rich Man said. Better edge rush. Didn't even say that. I think Michael Williams. I think Damon Wilson. I think the speed out there. I mean, I think C.J. Williams is like a linebacker with like DB speed, bro.
Heck yeah.
So, man, like, but I think all in all, like, I'm just wanting to see what Alabama's holding, man. I mean, yeah, you get to see him play against who they open up against, Western Kentucky or something like that. Let's look at Alabama's schedule before we move away. Western Kentucky.
Maybe we should be shaking this man's hand, because the more I think about it, the more I realize we needed some bulletin board material.
Maybe.
And then he specifically used the word elite, which is either you're either elite or you're not. That's something Kirby is famous for saying. Guarantee you that's on loop somewhere at the practice facility every day now. Like, we needed something. We needed some motivation. We needed somebody to not tell us how awesome we are, because really that's all we've been hearing. And that's never a good thing. You want somebody to tell you a new one, or, tell you about yourself, or, not tell you it's all good. Georgia 13-0, 15, 17-0, however many games we got to win this year, So, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe it's part of his master plan for us to get
I can tell you this much.
Years.
I'm going to look at Alabama real quick, and then we're going to get into something else. But I mean, I don't know, man. You can be shocked tomorrow night at my record predictions, but Western Kentucky in Tuscaloosa, that's a win. South Florida in Tuscaloosa. Now, that was almost a loss last year with Saban. I will tell you that is not the same South Florida team that you're used to seeing. I think the guy's name starts with a G. He used to be the Alex, starts with a G. Don't know, weird name. But he was the OC at Tennessee last year, and he has turned this team around. He's made USF like, USF used to be like and I'm down the street from USF, so let's just put it this way, man. We aren't getting anywhere close to selling any tickets out at Raymond James for USF games, right?
Yeah.
I think this game will be better on paper than you think it will. So you look at those two games, Wisconsin and Madison. There's the first test, right? Then you got Georgia and Tuscaloosa. That's a test. Vandy, South Carolina, Tennessee and Knoxville, Missouri and Tuscaloosa, LSU in Baton Rouge, Oklahoma in Norman, and then Auburn. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't look at Alabama's schedule any different than I look at Georgia's schedule as far as strength.
Yeah, it's not an easy schedule at all, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, 2 losses, maybe 3.
I mean, am I wrong? Are there if I get it? So he took Ole Miss at Oxford, and he took Alabama and Tuscaloosa. That's pretty ballsy, man. Did I say that on the show? Ballsy. That's pretty wild, man, that he took that in Tuscaloosa, and Kalen DeBoer's first game in Tuscaloosa, man, with so much. I mean, there'll be so much riding on that. And I heard him say, well, they're going to be running on house money. I guess they're assuming that everybody's going to pick Georgia. Well, guess what? Everybody's picked Georgia in that spot the entire offseason, because you don't know what you're going to get with Kalen DeBoer this year. If it's Nick Saban, yeah. It's Nick Saban, yeah. They're playing with house money, because they're like, nobody believes in Alabama, and Kirby can't beat Nick Saban. Well, you heard it. You heard what Michael Bratton said. Kirby can't beat Nick Saban. Thank you for saying that, because this ain't Nick Saban. This is not Nick Saban anymore. This is Alabama. And in my opinion, Alabama this year, unlike any other year, is very they're just very, very what's the word for it, man? Their armor is a little bit not what it used to be.
There's a chink in the armor.
There you go. So, like, you look
sure.
at this. If Western can, let's look at the possibilities of losses. Western Kentucky, South Florida's a win. Let's say they win in Madison, right? Let's say they lose to Georgia, they're 3-1. They beat Vandy, they're 4-1. South Carolina's 5-1. Tennessee and Knoxville. Let's say they lose 5-2. Missouri and Tuscaloosa. I mean, I don't know, man.
50-50.
50-50. 5-2, but they're already 5-2. LSU, but in Baton Rouge, I'm not high on LSU.
That's a night game. It's
Right.
gonna be a night game.
I'm not high on LSU, but I also understand LSU in Death Valley. If they're clicking on all cylinders, a night game, that's a difficult game, man. Prime time, Mercer, and then by the way, you got to end your season going to Oklahoma to Norman, and then you got the Iron Bowl, which we want to see what the Iron Bowl is going to be this year, right?
Yep.
So I don't know, man. Michael Bratton might be. I'm going to be tuning in a lot, even more intent with that SEC podcast. If you're listening right now, if that SEC podcast is catching any like hits from this podcast, little old dogs down south, dude, Michael Bratton, you can have us on, man. We'd love to talk to you about this. We'd love to go back and forth. We'd be a lot more classy than you can explain to it. Who's our man on Finebaum who represents Georgia? Fish.
The worst person they could possibly have to represent our fandom. Daryl from Columbus. I'm glad he's a dog fan, but I wish that they would pick another dog fan, like a more well-spoken, a better quick thinker, because this guy just gets beat down in every argument he's ever in. Like, even when we were winning national championships, like, people were calling in and just making him look foolish, making him look stupid. Just we got to get some better representation than that. Like, I feel like either you or I or Bobby should call in, or Rich Man can call in and do a way better job than this guy. This dude is a straight clown.
I feel like you got to be like 50-50. Like, I don't know, man. You got to be like 70-30, like clown and crazy. Okay, I can't say it on the show. Clown and crazy, 70%, and the 30% like knows some Georgia stuff to get on that show, man. Let me catch up on these comments. Rich Man said, Kirby going to repeat that 1,000 times. He says you're not elite. Dude, I'm just to make sure if he doesn't check out that podcast, man, or he doesn't watch Finebaum, I'm trying to look at ways to get this comment into the press room for Kirby, man. We're going to hear from Kirby right here in a second. And then Rich Man says any little slip is going to put a chink in DeBoer's armor, and that team confidence could crumble. I totally agree. I don't know what Milton's going to be, man. I will tell you here. Remember I said this. If DeBoer tries to take the Penix offense and put it to Jalen, biggest mistake he's ever made. Alabama will have the worst year they've ever had, and DeBoer will be minimal time in Alabama. I'm telling you, Penix is a much better quarterback than Milroe.
He's a 100%. Much better passer.
100%, man. If that's what they try to bring to the table, look out. So let's hop in real quick. We're going to add Kirby to the stage. Let's hear what he had to say about scrimmage 2. We'll end with scrimmage 2 tonight on this pop-up podcast. So let's hear what Kirby had to say about scrimmage 2.
Finished up scrimmage 2 Saturday, and players had Sunday and Monday off, and it's a big recovery time for us. We kind of finished what we consider to be training camp on Saturday afternoon, and we are still working on us and focusing on us and getting better. We're going to work on opponents for a couple days before we dive into Clemson later this week.
Yeah, Coach, real simple. What'd you learn about your football team this fall camp?
Yeah, that we've got good mental toughness. We're in a good spot in terms of physicality. They've grinded. We're not where we need to be by any means, but we have made progress. I mean, scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2 progress was good. I saw things that I needed to see in terms of tackling, playing better without the coaches on the field, all the things you look for in young players to see them grow. You know, there's a small body of guys that have played a lot of football here that I know can go out there and execute. Then there's a larger body of new players that have to prove that. And I thought we had more guys execute without their coaches on the field Saturday and push through the heat, which is mentally tough, that you have to be able to get through that to grow and get better. And I'm pleased with where we are coming out of camp.
Kirby, is there any injury updates that you could provide us with?
Who? Like, what's your question on?
Robinson, running back, status.
It's bad.
Which Robinson?
Which Robinson?
Yeah, Roderick's dealing with a little bit of a turf toe, and don't know when he's going to become or be available. But we had a good group of backs really do good things Saturday. Who else you ask about?
Warren Prince.
Yeah, Warren's been working his way back. He's hitting, I think, around 75, 85% on his GPS. He has improved each and every day. He's been dealing with a little bit of Achilles, but that was coming into camp. It was something we were aware of. And actually today, he's supposed to get back and do a lot more work with us.
Coach, what have you seen from the 3 transfer receivers, Colby, London, and Michael, so far in camp?
Colby's been dealing with a hamstring some, so he hasn't been 100%. London had a big jump from scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2. And Michael Jackson is a guy that's been really reliable for us, hard worker, competitor, continues to improve and get better. And I'm pleased with all 3 of those guys.
So we'll pause right there. Let's hop in real quick. Let's take Kirby off the stage real quick. So obviously, like scrimmage 2, right? So a lot of the bullet points that Kirby talked about, obviously when he hit injuries, that was a big topic that he didn't say much about, but we'll cover here in a second. So big news, though, positive news. Let's go positive news from scrimmage 2. Return of Jared Wilson. I heard he played most of that scrimmage. Yeah, a little bummed up, but I really feel like if Kirby thought he could go for the scrimmage, and this was a scrimmage that was that I'm hearing from a lot of people. There was only certain people that got into the scrimmage, but a lot of the coaches, players that are reporting on this said it was very similar to a Bloody Tuesday. They let them really go at it. Not a lot of coaches on the field. And they told them, they're like, we want to see who's going to compete. They want to see who's hitting. So they were fully prepared for any injuries that came out of that, right? But that's going to make this team better. That's going to make this team. I mean, how many teams are out there that are hitting full steam? And you're talking about a team with a lot of talent, a lot of zip in what's going on, right? So to see Jared Wilson back out there, took the majority of the snaps. That gave Tate Ratledge. If you notice, Tate when Jared's out, Tate's moving over. I think the depth at tackle with Monroe Freeling, with Micah Wilson. I mean, I think those are helpful so that Drew Bobo, even though I heard good things about Drew Bobo, I think it helps them move some things around to put Tate at center to still give them great depth. A lot of good things from Monroe Freeling. A lot of good things, obviously, for Ernest and Dylan Fairchild, things of that nature. So they feel good about Tate Ratledge. And then Nate Frazier was a huge talk. And obviously, I think you look at the depth in our running back room. However, he talked about Rod Robinson dealing with a toe. He didn't play because he's dealing with a toe, obviously, because we just said it. He wanted that scrimmage. There was a lot of players, by the way, that didn't play in the scrimmage. Number one, because he wanted this scrimmage to be very, very up-tempo. And he wanted them to hit. He wanted this to be a preview of what we call Bloody Tuesday, which we're not going to talk much about it because I thought it would be very cool during week 1 or 2 to talk about what actually goes on in that Tuesday that is different and is different for the culture than any other team out there in college football. But Nate Frazier, tons of carries, right? Etienne, Robinson, they're looking for what he can do to fit in the scheme, I think. So, you look at Branson, I call it Robinson times 2, right? Branson, Rod. So I think Frazier brings a little bit of a different. If I'm hearing correctly, they're saying Sony Michel, but the name they're using more than Sony is Noshawn Moreno. Very elusive, very slippery, spinny, jumpy type back, right? What jumps out to you about Jared Wilson, snaps from Nate Frazier? You want to add to that, Fish?
I'm just glad Wilson is recovering nicely, and he got out there and was able to play a little bit because he's going to be a huge part. So we need Tate over there at guard. Like the more we have, if those two are all both on the line's that much better, obviously. Yeah. And if Tate can play where he's, used to playing, I mean, I know he can just roll over and snap the ball. He's smart. He's intelligent. Right. He's a senior. He's been there forever. Is he a 4-year starter?
Who's that? Tate?
Yeah.
Yes. Tate is a 4-year starter.
So, that just Wilson being back just makes our offensive line that much better. And I love little Nate Frazier. Like, I hope he can, emulate Marino, because Marino was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And he's fast. Like, he's a track star. A 10-3, 10-4 as a junior, 100-yard dash. That's impressive. That's super fast.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think he's a name.
I'm excited about both those guys.
Yeah, he's a name that a lot of people know, and we're going to talk about a little bit more as the season progresses, I think, because when I heard that, and I've only heard one sports writer call that name, a lot of people want the tendency to go to Sony. But if you guys remember correctly, Sony was more of a downhill guy. He wasn't really, you watch Sony, he wasn't that, Sony had some gifted speed, but he was a downhill runner, when you look at him and Chubb, they were very similar. But see, this guy, Noshawn Moreno, any pick that I have of Noshawn was always when he was 20 feet in the air hurdling somebody, or he was spinning, or he was like, you lost him in between tackles. Next thing you know, you gained him because he came out of there and he was running free, So, we always look to kind of compare. We're definitely not comparing them to Sony, to Sony Michel and Noshawn. They were their own players, but I would say to get people in the avenue of who you might see in that number 3 uniform, look to see a little bit of those remnants from Noshawn Moreno. Obviously, ETN didn't participate. I don't know if that was because of possible suspension. We still don't know what suspension looked like. Does that mean he's first half? Does that mean he's not playing? Obviously, we'll know. Anytime Kirby gets that question, it's always, we take care of discipline in-house, right? So Gunnar Stockton, I heard he pretty much locked up the backup position. Not that it was a question. I don't think anybody had that question, but I think he had one of the best games. The best scrimmages he's had in his career at Georgia as far as falls are concerned. So that's good to hear. And then, there's questions of, I think we can kind of go on we can kind of chase a bone on this one and talk about, who is it? Puglisi? Is it, what does Rashada look like? That's a whole other show. I think they both add elements, but I think, to this day, I can't really tell you what I think. I think just Rashada being on the roster is Kirby, another one of his ploys to be like, hey, like, we have scholarship players that are pushing. He likes competition. He likes people to be pushed, right? Because you're one snap away from, if you look at ETN at the top of the depth chart of running backs, you're one step away from seeing a Frazier, from seeing a Chauncey Bowens, from seeing anybody that's in that room that's a freshman this year that could possibly stand out. You're one snap away from that possibility. So and this is one that I say for the end, but Aguero looks like he locked down the star position. I think we'll see Aguero there. The other thing I want to talk about is, and we brushed on it, Fish, but I want to see what you think. So Dan Jackson is probably slated to go with the ones against Clemson. I think he'll be the starter. Big game experience. He's played a lot more, obviously, than a KJ Bolden. But a lot of people out of all the freshmen are placing the freshman All-American tag on KJ Bolden. They like what they've seen. I think Travaris Robinson and Kirby really like what they see out of KJ. But do you agree with that? Do you feel like Dan Jackson is the right choice for that first game coming out, running out on the field as a starter?
He's a smart guy. He's very aware. Like, if I was looking at his awareness right now, it'd probably be in the 90s on NCAA. But he's a smart guy. He's way smarter than he is athletic. Not that he's not athletic. He's not, a Cam Chancellor or a Sean Taylor, or an Ed Reed, type of, safety. He's going to be in the right spot to make the right play more than, he's going to wow you with his athleticism. He's a good tackler. He's a safe bet. You know what I mean? He's proven, he's weathered, he's seasoned. KJ, maybe not so much, because he's just coming in as a true freshman, but he'll definitely see some playing time.
I agree. We didn't think we would see a lot of Malachi 2 years ago against Oregon. However, that was the game that solidified. I think Dan Jackson has been in that position a lot. And he knows that, his role and the athleticism that's coming onto that team he's a dog, man. He's a I don't want to call him a clipboard guy. That's all, but he's a textbook guy. He's going to be in those meetings. He's going to know where to be. He's going to know what coverage looks like. I think that's what you need coming out. And we get the cool. This week we're just going to talk about Georgia, but we get the game week next week. We're going to talk about what Clemson looks like, what Georgia looks like. We're going to get to break down Cole Klubnik and some names that you don't know. Maffa, that's the last name of the running back from Clemson. That's supposed to be the guy this year for them, but he's a classroom guy. So I think Dan is a good call, and to let KJ. I keep wanting to say CJ. We got a CJ and KJ. But KJ get in there, and he's definitely going to be used in some positions. And then I heard great things. We didn't see a lot of defensive line play. McLeod played a little bit. We had some stats from Brinson. He did go. We saw a ton of snaps from Ajonye and Ugboko, which these two names are fairly new to us, but we're going to be looking at all of our depth. And if you remember these two names, they're both 4- and 5-star athletes that hit our defensive line. Ajonye is the one that's big that nobody's really seen, but a lot of people are saying some really good things about. Hadn't heard much about Jamal Jarrett, but we obviously know the big thing in there is Hall is also nursing another injury, Achilles. So it's just a lot of things in the air. I would say if we could really use those first 3 games to get those guys healthy before we roll into Alabama, that will be very beneficial. Do we have a bye before Alabama? I didn't look at that earlier on.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's see here. Yeah, we do. So the good news is we got Clemson. Well, I mean, it's not easy, man, for us. Clemson, and then we got Tennessee Tech, and then we get Kentucky and Lexington, and we got an off week. Both teams are off that week before, so definitely interesting.
Is Kentucky in Lexington, or is it in Athens?
Kentucky is in Lexington.
Really?
Yeah. Kentucky's
in
Lexington.
We went up there last year.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
No, they came here.
Cool.
They came here last year. But another name that we heard, Tyrion Ingram's-Dawkins looked really good. So that's a name that was out over the spring. Had surgery, came back. He looks good. So I don't know, man. Some people will look at it and they go, "Man, Kirby's holding out." I just think Kirby's just telling the truth. Like he's not being too high, he's not being too low. He's just kind of telling you the truth of what they're dealing with. But that doesn't mean the sky's falling on the defensive line. Like we're gonna feel. I mean, nobody's mentioned. I mean, Nazir Stackhouse is a solid guy in the middle of that line, man. Right? So and you know what, Michael? Yeah, he moved outside, but it's hard to believe that Michael won't play some downs, in the trenches if the need is there. So you look at Stackhouse, you look at the option of Michael Williams playing on first and second down on that line, just to add some run stopping depth. Brinson looked good, McLeod looked good, Dawkins. There's more depth there than you think. I would love to just be able to call bullcrap on that one after we see the Clemson game, but we'll see. We shall see, man. But little news as we end the show tonight. Tonight's the first night we actually went live on. We'll be able to transfer this and go live with X, which is Twitter. So there's a Dogs Down South on Twitter now. So if you're a tweeter, Twitter, an X follower, you can look us up at Dogs Down South and catch us over there live. Also YouTube, go follow on the YouTube page. Trying to get to 1,000 followers on YouTube. Apple Podcast episode 22 is up right now from last week. We finished up, right? We talked about who a lot of media is saying is going to be the 2 teams that's left after everything's done, and that's Texas and Georgia, although Michael Bratton says it's going to be neither of those teams. We'll see, man. That's crazy. Also, Michael Bratton apparently is a big-time Florida hater, and it just so happens that SEC podcast and SEC Nation and Finebaum are going to be at SEC Nation going to be at the Florida-Miami game. So I got a feeling that when they interview Napier, that's going to be a very interesting day.
A little awkward.
Yeah, very awkward, especially if that SEC podcast is there. But we'll see, man. I'm going to follow more of these shows of his. And, hey, man, Michael Bratton, Cousin Shane, if you're listening, man, you want to have us on the show, we'll talk about it, man. We'll talk about it. We won't be like Larry. We won't talk about how, 1-5 against Saban and you beat Saban and the refs. We're just going to talk about the fact that, hey, man, you didn't mention that there were there were 3 like number 1 round draft picks missing in that game, right? And then the second thing was, and nobody heard this, but he mentioned, that the time that Georgia did beat Alabama, they were missing all their starting receivers, which that's a grasp. So, but anyways, Fish, final thoughts tonight for this pop-up podcast. We got a lot of, I call it junk off the table, on the table, however you want to call it. And we're able to kind of do a little beefing, right?
We need to do things like this whenever somebody talks a little smack. We need to go out and, air our grievances.
Yeah.
I like it. I like pop-up. I like the pop-up podcast. That's great. I had fun.
Pop-up, man.
And, we're 11 days away.
Yeah, man. 11 days. We're going to defend the fort, man. Defend the fort. We're dogs down south for a reason, bro.
That's right.
Rich Man, thanks for joining. If everything goes right, Mr. Rich Man's going to be on the show with us tomorrow night. So that'll be a fun one, man. Look forward to tomorrow night, 7 o'clock tomorrow night. So what's on the agenda? We're going to look at winners and losers from fall camp. Loaded show tomorrow night. Winners and losers from fall camp. We are going to pick who we think is going to be 16 all the way to 1 in the SEC. And then guess what we get to do? We get to finally pick some games. We will be picking there's not a big slate of games. I can't even get down to them. We're picking Montana State, New Mexico. Figure out who you want in that one. SMU, Nevada, Delaware State, Hawaii, and then Florida State and Georgia Tech, which is the week 0 game day game. So lots to talk about. It'll be a fun night tomorrow night. Make sure you join 7 o'clock, Dogs Down South, YouTube, Facebook, Dogs Down South, Facebook, now on X, on Twitter. Go drop a like, go drop a follow for myself and the Fish, Adam Fisher. Rich Man, thanks for joining tonight. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night, and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.